Welcome to Captain Jeff's Airline Pilot Guy show, the view from his side of the cockpit door.
Airline Pilot Guy, episode 168.
Flight 209er, you are cleared for takeoff.
Roger.
LA, good morning. 123.9er.
Roger. Request connected.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 603 in the Hilton Hotel in Albany, New York. In this episode, an update on the crash of the A400M in Seville, Spain, the NTSB report on the landing at the wrong airports. They're blaming air traffic controllers and software. At least they're complicit in wrong runway landings. Hawaiian Airlines A300 returns to LAX after a possible fuel leak. And IFE hacker Chris Roberts. Legit or kook? So get all settled in. Tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions. Electronic devices powered on. Flight 168 is ready for pushback. Well, hello everyone and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy show. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. You'll find it's a nice place to hang out. A lot of great people in the APG, the Airline Pilot Guy community. And great place to start is, well, of course, by listening to the show and then sending in feedback and then going over to the website, airlinepilotguy.com, joining the aviation geek community. And lots of great stuff over there. And yeah, it's a fun time. I'm really enjoying doing the show. I've done it for, about a little over 5 years now, about 5.5 years. And I'm enjoying every episode. And we're now on 168. And I am back on a trip, a 3-day trip. This is day 2. I had vacation last week, and I mentioned that I went out to California and I visited my mom for Mother's Day, and then I came back, and then my daughter had her award ceremony. She just graduated from high school, and she won a couple of awards. One, which was the Outstanding Senior in AP Latin, and that's advanced placement, I think. It's like a college-level course. And she also got a departmental award. She was awarded the Leadership in Dance. She's a ballet dancer. Well, at the school, she was doing all kinds of different dance, ballet and modern, etc. So we were very proud of our youngest child who just graduated from high school and will be off to college in the late summer. And let's see what else is going on. I didn't mention it on the last show. I may not have known actually on the last show, but my podcast, the Airline Pilot Guy show, was one of 10 podcasts picked for the top 10 aviation podcasts by Global Pilot Life. And you can find that at globalpilotlife.com. Well, I'll have a link in the show notes, so I'm not going to give you the whole link, but you can just find it there, and you can check out all the other wonderful podcasts which were included in the top 10 list. And let's see, I received a note from Neville in the UK and said he was going to be in the Orlando area in June, and was wondering if I was going to be there because he hears occasionally of my visiting that fine town. And if so, maybe we could get together and have some kind of a meetup. And so I will be actually in Orlando, and I'll be there on the 16th and 17th. So hopefully one of those days we'll be able to arrange some kind of a meetup. So mark that on your calendars if you happen to be in the area. And also in Miami, I think it was it David? I didn't write it down. Is training for the 787, and I'm sorry if it's not David. I think it is. And he said something about, well, hey, if you're going to be there, I think he's starting later this month and then ends in sometime in July. And I said, yeah, I'm going to be there in Miami on the 23rd, and in Fort Lauderdale on the 24th, I believe. So more information about that as we approach that time frame. But if you're in the Miami/Fort Lauderdale area and you want to hang out with some like-minded airline geeks or aviation geeks, keep those dates in mind. All right, I'm going to try to not spend too much time at the beginning of the show talking about what's going on. Oh, well, as I said, I'm on a 3-day trip, and this is day 2. Yesterday, we flew from Atlanta to somewhere. Where did we go first? Oh, Norfolk, Virginia, and then back to Atlanta. And then coming back into Atlanta, what we were supposed to do, both Brian and I together, was after about a 3-hour sit in Atlanta, we were going to fly from Atlanta to Washington, D.C., Reagan, for our relatively short layover, and received a message via ACARS that I had a reroute, and it was just me for some reason, not both of us. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Oh, actually, I do know what happened because the captain that was supposed to do the trip that I did, which was after I got to Atlanta and went to New Orleans for a nice long layover in New Orleans, he and his crew got stuck in Jacksonville. I guess they had some kind of a power outage at the airport, and mucked everything up, and he was delayed for a couple of hours. So that's why they quickly said, you know what, we'll use Captain Jeff to fly to New Orleans, and then the other guy will fly with Brian up to DCA. And then they both flew back this morning, and I flew from New Orleans back, and then I am back on my regular trip. And Brian was a little disappointed that he wasn't able to go to New Orleans with me, because New Orleans is a great city. If you've never been there, you should make an attempt to visit that town. Lots of great food. And had some great red beans and rice with sausage, and went to Acme Oyster House, which is in the same block as our hotel, and had some char-grilled oysters and some gumbo, and it was really good. So, yeah, that's about it. So I'm back on the trip, and we met back up again this morning, and flew up here to Albany, New York. And it looks like a beautiful day outside. It's when we got in, the temperature was still in the 50s. I'm not sure what it's up to now, but really nice weather here, nice blue skies. And now you're caught up, so that means it's time for us to continue to move on and talk about the coffee fund.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
The coffee fund is your way to help me offset some of the costs of producing this podcast, and of course to contribute to my caffeine addiction. And my favorite caffeine delivery system is coffee, hence the Coffee Fund. If you want to learn more about the Coffee Fund, you can head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And since, oh, by the way, this is the Ink Spots singing the Java Jive. They recorded this in 1940. And while they're serenading us in the background, let's tell you about those fine folks who contributed since the last show. And we have Tedford Males, I'm thinking, not males, but Males, Stuart Aslett, Shane Saw, Billy Beatty, Philip Bigun, Christopher Rivadell. Sorry if I'm butchering everybody's names. Scrappenval and William Ryback. Thank you very much, every one of you, for contributing since the last program. And then Patreon is another way to take part in the Coffee Fund. You can become a patron of the Airline Pilot Guy Show. And we have 3 new patrons since the last episode. Drew Stevens, Mark Ross, and La Vida Loque, I think that's the way you pronounce your name. And, of course, every episode, if you're a patron of the show via Patreon, every single episode you have agreed to give me a tip or support the arts, the patron of the arts. And so I don't mention your name each and every show, but I know you're out there, I know you're contributing, and I do appreciate it. So if you want to check out the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund via the Patreon page, you can head over to patreon.com/airlinepilotguy. Or, you know what, let's just make it easy. Head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. Thanks again. I love coffee, I love tea, I love the Java Jive and it loves me. Time for the news. Well, we talked about the crash of the military transport built by Airbus, the Airbus A300M, and one of them crashed near Seville, Spain on the 9th of May after a failed emergency landing during its first flight. Of course, I don't know why they say it was a failed emergency landing. They never even made it close to the runway. Anyway, investigators have found evidence that the plane crash in Spain may have been caused by software problems. 4 crew members on board were killed in the accident. A spokesman for the European plane maker, Airbus, told the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC, that its engineers had since discovered anomalies in the aircraft's data logs that could be relevant to the accident. It has sent out an alert to other air forces that have taken deliveries of the propeller aircraft, saying that they should carry out checks of the electronic control units on board, ECUs. I believe those are like fuel control units that are mounted on or very near the engines. For practical purposes, these are computers, and there is one on each engine. There we go. What the ECU does, it takes the pilot's inputs on the controls and then makes the engines perform in the optimum way to achieve what the pilot is asking it to do, taking a whole number of things into account. You can conclude that as we've asked for checks to be made on the ECU, that is the area of interest, again, according to an Airbus spokesman. He added that problems had only been found after the company's investigators had checked both the maintenance data gathered by Airbus's flight operations team and the logs that had been generated during ground tests of flight MSN-23. The maintenance data is vast streams of data showing everything going on all over the airplane, and one of the things we saw seems as if it could be pertinent to the accident. According to a report by news agency Reuters, the problem might have been caused by the way the software had been installed rather than an issue with its design. So we'll keep you updated on any news items regarding this crash in future episodes. But that's about it for that. Let's see. A Hawaiian Airlines Airbus A330 with 300 people on board, Hawaiian Flight 3, turned around shortly after departure from LAX and landed safely about 2:30 p.m. This is in the Los Angeles Times. It said a Honolulu-bound jetliner that leaked hundreds of gallons of fuel at a passenger terminal before takeoff returned to LAX after a fuel warning light activated in the cockpit. A warning light indicating a possible fuel leak prompted the pilots to return, although the plane's instruments did not indicate any fuel loss, according to the airline. Before returning, the plane circled to burn off fuel to avoid making an overweight landing. That's kind of ironic, isn't it? It's a fuel leak that they're returning for, but then they purposely leak even more fuel to get the weight of the airplane down. The flight was scheduled to leave at 10 a.m. but did not take off until 12:48 because fuel spilled onto the tarmac while the plane was parked at Terminal 2. Again, airport sources said an estimated 350 gallons leaked from the plane, which they described as one of the largest fuel spills in the airport's history. Before takeoff, the jet was refueled. Based on the airline's preliminary reports, the spill was not caused by a mechanical problem with the plane. I'm not sure what they mean by that. So was it a human fueling error? Alison Croyle, an airline spokeswoman, said maintenance crews inspected the aircraft and determined that the fuel valve in question had been properly closed. FAA officials also said they reviewed the situation and cleared the plane to fly. I don't know. I'm scratching my head on this one. Not sure exactly what prompted this leak of 350 gallons and what caused the light to come on. They don't say what light it was. Once they took off and then returned, just a lot of holes in this story, I'm thinking. So we'll have to see what is going on here. By the way, 350 pounds times 350 gallons times 6.7 pounds per gallon is about 2,300 and some odd pounds of fuel. That's a lot of fuel that was leaking on the tarmac. Anywho, let's see. Next time you're tempted to take a snapshot of an interesting cloud formation or your seatmate sprawling into your personal space on a plane, remember Arash Shirazi and Stephen Leslie. Both of them are law-abiding citizens and air travelers, and both recently ran afoul of the airline industry's confusing photography rules. With only days before the busy summer travel season unleashes millions of shutterbugs on America's airports, it is helpful to know about the airline industry's little problem with cameras so that your own camera doesn't become hung up on it. I'm trying to recall exactly where I got this this article here. Let me quickly. This is actually from LinkedIn. I don't know if this is where it originated or if they're just repeating another article from another agency. Well, anyway, Shirazi, a music agent, was recently waiting in the Reagan National Terminal for a flight from Washington to Los Angeles when he decided to take a picture of an American Airlines aircraft with his smartphone. He wanted to share it with his friends on social media. I mean, how many of us have done that? You know, you take out your camera or your phone and then use the camera on it to snap some pictures of the airplane outside, docked to the jetway, etc. Anyway, a gate agent saw him snapping photos and demanded to know why he was taking a picture of aircraft equipment. I showed her the picture and offered to delete it, but she became even more combative, accusing me of being a security threat. This is according to Arash Shirazi. She made it a point to tell me that she was going to document the security breach in my travel record. Shirazi said he apologized, adding that even as a frequent flyer, he was unaware of any prohibitions against taking photos of airplanes. But she was curt and told me to either get on the plane or take the next one. He's right. American Airlines doesn't publish any prohibitions against taking photos of its aircraft. But late last year, it updated its internal policies to allow employees at the airport, including ticket counters, gates, cargo, baggage, and on board, to stop passengers from taking pictures. The policy is in place to protect employees and customers, said Andrea Hughley, an American Airlines spokeswoman. Now we switch over to Stephen Leslie. He faced a similar reaction from an airline employee when he started filming a passenger boarding a JetBlue flight. Leslie, a soft-spoken pharmacist flying from Albuquerque to New York, noticed a family with a sick child. The crew looked worried about the boy's health. His family said he had cancer, and he had been medically cleared to fly. The incident occurred only a few days after another cancer patient was expelled from an Alaska Airlines flight under similar circumstances, and Stephen Leslie decided to tape the conversation on his phone. It was my original intent to record this uncomfortable situation because I felt it was wrong. Apparently, JetBlue felt something was wrong too. After the family was removed from the aircraft, an airline employee ordered that Leslie delete the video. He politely refused, and then he too was escorted from the aircraft. the reason, a crew member told him he didn't feel safe being recorded. JetBlue rebooked Leslie on the next flight, which departed 9 hours later. So, it's very unclear, the guidelines regarding what you're allowed to do. We've talked about this before on earlier episodes of the podcast about people getting in trouble by snapping photos either on board the airplane or outside the airplane, taking pictures of it, etc. And it doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason to the enforcement of these rules, but just be aware that they are out there and they can confiscate your stuff or kick you off the airplane or whatever if they think that you're a security threat. So if you're going to take pictures, be kind of sly about it. Make it look like you're doing something on your phone or tablet and not taking pictures, I guess. I don't know. That's my advice. Anyway, so we have that. And then finally, many of you sent me feedback regarding this guy, Chris Roberts, who is the head of the CEO, I believe, of the company. Let's see, what's the name of the company? Denver-based. Based in Denver, One World Labs. He founded One World Labs, a Denver-based cybersecurity company, and he is a cybersecurity researcher. Remember, we talked about the fact that he was escorted off of the airplane United flight in Syracuse, and then when he tried to fly again, United said, don't think so. And so a lot of people have been talking about this incident, and it's been getting a lot of attention in the IT world. And so I received some email from somebody giving me a link to a security show. Let's see, what's the name of this? The show's name is, where is it? Security Weekly. Interview with Chris Roberts. It's a YouTube video of this show, and Chris Roberts is on it, the guy that got arrested and released. And so we've been learning more about this guy, and apparently an arrest warrant was issued, and in the warrant, well, here, let me read a little bit more of this article. The claims of One World Labs founder Chris Roberts have been a subject of much speculation after it was reported on Friday that he told FBI agents he had been able to hack into a flight he was on and caused it to turn sideways by manipulating the engine controls from his computer. And so let's go to the arrest warrant, and I'm looking at, I'll have a link to this in the show notes. It's a PDF of the FBI arrest warrant, and I'm starting on page 11 of the document. Item 18, a special agent with the FBI interviewed Chris Roberts on February 13th, 2015 and March 5th, 2015 to obtain information about vulnerabilities with in-flight entertainment, IFE, systems on airplanes. Chris Roberts advised that he had identified vulnerabilities with IFE systems on Boeing 737-800, 737-900, 757-200, and Airbus A320 aircraft. Chris Roberts furnished the information because he would like the vulnerabilities to be fixed. During these conversations, Mr. Roberts stated the following: that he had exploited vulnerabilities with IFE systems on aircraft while in flight. He compromised the IFE systems approximately 15 to 20 times during the time period 2011 through 2014. He last exploited an IFE system during the middle of 2014, last year. Each of the compromises occurred on airplanes equipped with IFE systems with video monitors installed in the passenger seatbacks. That the IFE systems he compromised were Thales and Panasonic systems. The IFE systems had video monitors installed in the passenger seatbacks. Well, we just said that. That he was able to exploit / gain access to or hack the IFE system after He would get physical access to the IFE system through the Seat Electronic Box, the SEB, installed under the passenger seat on airplanes. He said he was able to remove the cover for the SEB under the seat in front of him by wiggling and squeezing the box. After removing the cover to the SEB that was installed under the passenger seat in front of him, he would use a Cat6 Ethernet cable with a modified connector to connect his laptop computer to the IFE system while in flight. He then connected to other systems on the airplane network after he exploited, gained access to, or hacked the IFE system. He stated that he then overwrote code on the airplane's thrust management computer while aboard a flight. He stated that he successfully commanded the system he had accessed to issue the CLB or climb command. He stated that he thereby caused one of the airplane engines to climb, resulting in a lateral or sideways movement of the plane during one of these flights. He also said that he used Vortex software after compromising, exploiting, or hacking the airplane's networks. He used the software to monitor traffic from the cockpit system. And then it goes on with more details. But the thing that has been highlighted in the news lately about Chris Roberts and this hacking of in-flight entertainment systems is that claim, that statement, that he was able to control the engines, the thrust management system, and overwrite code and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sorry, but I'm waving the BS flag on this one. And I'm not the only one. A lot of you would say, well, you're just a pilot. You don't know anything about this stuff. You're not an IT expert. Well, a lot of IT experts are also saying that it seems very unlikely that he was able to compromise a jet's controls via its in-flight entertainment system, making it bank briefly to one side. The claims have been the subject of much speculation. Okay, I already read that. These systems are separate, said Jeffrey Price, an aviation security expert and aviation professor at Metropolitan State University in Denver. From what all the aircraft manufacturers have been telling us, the in-flight entertainment system is a different system from the software that controls the avionics, flight controls, and navigation systems of the plane. This sounds scary, but it is absolutely not possible, said John Miller, a computer security researcher with Cylance in Irvine, California. The only thing that a hacker could do would be to prevent someone from watching movies, said Miller, who has tested the vulnerability of in-flight entertainment systems. Federal law enforcement officials say they are assessing Roberts' claims, but so far have no credible information to suggest an airplane's flight control system can be accessed or manipulated from its in-flight entertainment system. So, so I'm thinking to myself, well, couldn't this be easily corroborated? I mean, if the guy really did do what he claims he did when he was interviewed the 2 times by the FBI, well, he said 15 to 20 times he's done this in the last 3-4 years. If I were the FBI, I would be going to all these airlines that he's flown with, supposedly hacking away at the IFE system, and I would find the flights that he was on, and then I would contact the crews, the pilot crews that were piloting the flights to say, or interview them and say, did anything really odd happen on any of your flights, any of these flights that we have listed for you? I mean, did the engine all of a sudden just start accelerating and the airplane go into a yaw, or the airplane start climbing, whatever? That is something that we would notice. I saw one of the commenters on one of these articles said, oh, well, these guys, up at cruise altitude, the airplane's on autopilot, and, they probably wouldn't notice. Excuse me? Oh, come on. We'd notice if all of a sudden the engine started accelerating and the thrust started coming up and the airplane started yawing. I mean, we'd immediately, I'd be grabbing onto the controls going, whoa, what's going on? What is our autoflight system doing? And I would write it up. I mean, you can be sure of it. This whole thing is just so incredible, and I mean incredible, like not believable, that it's almost silly. And again, I'm not the only one who thinks this way. And I think this guy is just enjoying his 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or whatever in fame. And the spotlight is on him. Look at me. I'm a a security researcher. I've unveiled all these flaws in the in-flight entertainment systems, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I am not convinced. Now, maybe you are. Maybe somebody listening to this show right now is saying, oh, no, Captain Jeff, this can be done. But, maybe the more modern airplanes like the Dreamliner, the Airbus A350, etc., maybe those systems are somehow designed where there's no air gap between the systems that control, avionics, flight controls, engine controls, etc., from the in-flight entertainment system. But for the life of me, I can't believe that that's true. But let's just even say it was true. If so, all of this is bringing light to that, of course, and maybe the engineers are going, maybe we should, look at this and fix this so that nobody can actually get in through the IFE system and take over an airplane. But, I just don't think that happened and that's possible. But I'm just a dumb pilot. I don't know. I just went to Georgia Institute of Technology and Computer Science and Engineering at Auburn University. I don't know anything. Okay. So let's move on. I just wanted to mention, talk about that because obviously many of you are interested in this story and we're going to continue to watch what's happening. But again, I don't think it's going to be a big surprise when finally they're going to say, you know what? We haven't been able to find any corroborating evidence whatsoever that this really happened, except for maybe in his own mind. So that's all I'm going to do for news today. Let's move on to feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
Thank you. Now, we're going to try to do as much as we can, hopefully catch up on the show. I did say that I was going to try to do a feedback extra, but that didn't happen. I'm just too busy. My life is just going crazy. Lots of stuff going on. Many of you know that. And I'm doing my best to do everything as best I can. So here we go. Enough of that. Let's start with Joe. He says, this is in reference to show 164, in which you talked about chamber flights. I think he's talking about altitude chambers and the hypoxia effects. As a civilian pilot, I took a chamber flight when I was at the University of North Dakota. Great learning experience. Unfortunately, I only got to use this training when I only get to use the benefits from this training when I am chaining up a semi at 14,000 feet on Loveland County west of Denver. Thanks for the great show, Joe. Yeah, well, it's still good to have that experience, as I was mentioning, and he's responding to the fact that many of us out there have not had altitude chamber experience, so we could see what our own hypoxia symptoms are. I, luckily, was able to do that because I was in the United States Air Force. I think all military pilots go through altitude chamber training. And we were talking about the benefits of it and that, even civilians should have the opportunity to go through this kind of training. More than just book training, like reading something, this is what's going to happen, but actually experiencing it because it really does make a big impact on, the importance of recognizing your hypoxia symptoms. And Joe actually got to do it as a civilian pilot at North Dakota, University of North Dakota, a fine university. So thank you, Joe, for putting your 2 cents in regarding that. Nick Carson writes, hope you're well. I just did a flight on Flight Simulator from Denver to Los Cabos to Santa Ana, California. While on the ground in Los Cabos, which only has a single runway, 1634, a few taxiways that don't extend the full length running parallel to the runway, I could only taxi to the last taxiway and then proceed to backtrack, make a 180-degree turn, and then take off. While before entering the runway for the backtrack, I turned on all of my lights, strobe lights, wing, landing, etc. So I was wondering if this is a common practice in the real world. Does ATC tell you to position and hold once you've made the 180-degree turn, or does ATC just clear you for takeoff? Thank you for your great question, Nick. This is a good question. Number one, it depends on the airline as far as the lights that you turn on to make yourself more visible. I think that most airlines in North America, at least, when we're told to, anytime we're crossing a runway or going into position on a runway or backtracking on a runway, whatever, we turn on all available lights so that other people can tell that we're on the runway. Now, in Acme Airlines, when we are told to go on to hold, what do we call it, a position, now all of a sudden I'm drawing a blank, cleared to not position and hold, that was the old terminology. Line up and wait is the new terminology to kind of align it with the International Civil Aviation Organization, basically to do what everybody does in the world, which is the terminology line up and wait. When we do that at Acme, we turn on a lot of our lights, exterior lights, but we don't turn on our taxi or our landing light, the brighter light, because we want people that are crossing at the midpoint of the runway or the end of the runway, if we're in position for takeoff, we don't want them to think that we're actually rolling for takeoff. But that's, I think, just an airline-to-airline thing. But it's smart to turn on a lot of lights to let people know that you're on the runway. Some airplanes actually have lights on the tail, which I think is a great idea, a great design, so that somebody coming in for landing on that runway will see that there's an airplane in the line-up and hold position so that they don't overfly it or crash into it. That's always a good idea. Also, lights that kind of flash on and off, that's kind of a good idea as well. That gives more attention to the aircraft than a steady light. And so, yes, it is a real-world practice. And if I was told to backtrack, I would have all those lights on except for my bright landing lights until I was cleared for takeoff. And the second part of your question, does air traffic control tell you position and hold once you make the 180 turn, or do they just clear you for takeoff? I've experienced both of those. It just depends on the situation. It depends on the location. It depends on the air traffic controller, I guess. But usually they'll tell you to backtrack, do your 180-degree turn into takeoff position, and then wait, and then they will give you your clearance for takeoff after that point. And I've also had it where you were told to backtrack and clear for takeoff all in one fell swoop. So it can be both, all of the above. So thanks, Nick, for your question. Schuyler Morales, I think that's the way you pronounce your first name, Schuyler, Schuyler. That's the way I pronounce it. Morales writes, my dad works at Acme at the OCC, and as a result, I've made a lot of visits to the building, and on my visits have spent a good bit of time wandering the halls where there are sims that seem to be comprised or just comprised of the cockpit setups. No screens or full motion. I figure these are most for practicing flows and various checklists for certain irregular situations. But I was curious just how much time during your recurrent training you spend in a full motion sim, and how much time do you spend in one of these or other settings. It seems that there are a ton of these more basic sims relative to the full motion ones. Anyway, thanks for all the work you do on the show. It's really nice to have to listen on the way to work, on a flight, or just when I'm bored at the dorm. P.S. I'm taking my private pilot written/knowledge exam tomorrow. This was sent to me, about a couple weeks ago. We'll update the community on that, hoping to finish up work on my private by the end of the summer semester at my school, so I can transfer out to a different 141 school for fall and begin work on my instrument rating. And then he sent me an update. Just to update, I did indeed pass my private pilot knowledge test, though I didn't score as highly as I had hoped. I got an 88. Can't wait for the next podcast. Take care. Safe flying. Again, that's Schuyler Morales at Middle Georgia State College, class of 2017. And then, and then it says College of William and Mary, class of 2014. Oh. So the OCC, that's, hey, where Dispatcher Mike and Dispatcher Tom hang out. You should, if you're up there again one of these days, you should seek out these two gentlemen, these two fine APG community members who help me ask or answer questions on the show, and say hi to your dad for me. By the way, the OCC is the Operational Control Center. That's what that stands for. And so your question regarding the, what do we call those things? CDT, cockpit, CPTs, cockpit procedures trainers. Yeah, I think that's what that stands for. Basically, they're mock-ups of the cockpit. Some of them just have pictures of the panel. Some of them actually have knobs that kind of give, a feel for the actual device that you're activating. Sorry, I guess I need to turn off a couple of these applications that are running in the background of my machine, sending all those sound effects. There we go. And for recurrent training, no, they are really never used for recurrent training. I've never used them. We go in for recurrent training for 2 days or 3 days at the most. Lately, the past few years, it's been a 2-day period, and each day you go into the full motion simulator. The CPTs, or cockpit procedures trainers, are used mostly when you're going in and learning an airplane for the first time, when you're going through initial training or upgrade training or whatever, and working on your flows and that kind of thing. Yeah, not so much for recurrent training. So hope that answered your question, Schuyler, and congratulations on taking or passing your private pilot knowledge test. And hey, a pass is a pass. That's what I say. Okay. And a kiss is not a kiss. No, wait. That's something entirely different. All right. Moving on. Stuart sent some audio feedback.
Hi Jeff, it's Stuart in the UK. Just listening to episode 166, you discussing ILS and RNAV approaches, and could you just touch quickly for me on the difference between RNAV and ILS, what the advantages would be to RNAV opposed to ILS, and just explain that one a little bit more if you don't mind. Thank you.
Well, you betcha. Basically, the ILS instrument landing system approach is an older technology, or at least the system that we use is older technology. It's been around for many, many years, at least 30, 40 years, I think. I'm not sure exactly when it was developed, but it's been around for a while. I've been flying, it's been around ever since I started flying, which was in the early 80s, late 70s. So yeah, it's very reliable technology, but it relies upon ground-based navigational aids. So the system is comprised of basically two directional antennas that put out an electronic beam, one of which is the lateral guidance to a runway, and in 99% of the cases, the instrument landing system, the ILS beam, the localizer portion of that, the localizer is the lateral or side-to-side beam, is lined up exactly with the runway so that it's a perfectly straight-in approach to a runway. And so that's called the localizer. That's the lateral component of the ILS system. And then the vertical component of the system is the glide slope, and that's another electronic beam that, by the way, the localizer antenna is mounted on the far end of the runway, so that even when you've landed the airplane, if you are using the more capable system, there are various categories of approaches using ILS or instrument landing system. Category 1, which is the most common, brings you down to a decision altitude of about 200 feet above the runway. They have a Category 2 system that will bring you down in general to about 100 feet above the landing runway, and then a Category 3 system will bring you all the way down to either 50 feet before you have to see something, or some airplanes are certified to go all the way down to touchdown without seeing anything. And that's a Category 3, I think, B system, Category 3C. I think 3C is actually a system that will guide you all the way to the airport terminal or gate. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. But it's a very accurate system, and the localizer antenna is located at the far end of the runway, so that if you're using a Category 3 landing, auto land system, it'll guide the airplane even while it's doing its rollout on the runway. It'll keep it on the runway center line. So that makes sense to have it at the far end of the runway, so you still have that lateral guidance once you're on the runway. The glide slope antenna is mounted just to either side of the runway, and it is located right about the touchdown point, the touchdown zone. That makes sense. If you're following this very accurate guidance, glide slope guidance all the way down, you'd want it to take you to a point where you'd be in the touchdown zone for the landing runway. So that's where they mount the glide slope antenna. So that is the way the system works. It's a very narrow electronic beam that the avionics in the airplane, the ILS receiver in the airplane, can sense, and then your Autoflight system can track, or you can fly it by using the data that you receive based on those signals. And it's either going to be one of the bat wing kind of symbols that you see in some flight director attitude indicator, or even flat panel displays, or it might be a 2-bar system where you have a pitch bar and a lateral guidance bar that kind of shows you where to fly the airplane, where to bank, how to adjust your flight path to maintain those signals. And then, of course, the raw data, they have like a little bug, for lack of a better word, in the display that shows whether you're on the glide slope, above the glide slope, below the glide slope. Same thing with the course. It has the raw data bug will show you if you're tracking straight down the localizer course, or if you're to the left or to the right of it. And of course, just like a flashlight beam, if you turned on a flashlight in the dark of the night, and the beam kind of flares outward from the flashlight. So if you're far away, it's a pretty broad beam, but the closer you get to the flashlight, it becomes narrower and narrower and narrower. Same thing with these electronic beams. So as you get closer and closer to the runway, the sensitivity of these electronic beams gets higher and higher. So that's in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it than what I just described, but it also has some other components like markers that tell you where you are. Like we have an outer marker, a middle marker, and an inner marker on some approach systems. RNAV, on the other hand, is a system that does not rely on ground-based navigational aids. It's basically a self-contained system. Now, it might be a system that relies upon the global positioning system, the array of satellites out there in space. It might be a system that uses an internal reference unit, like the airplane that I'm flying has a couple IRUs, internal reference systems, that basically is a device that knows exactly where the airplane is once you've told it where it is to start with, and then it kind of keeps track of various acceleration forces using accelerometers, etc., and also using some other ground-based navigational aids to kind of keep it accurate, or as much as it can. And there are even some systems that are kind of hybrid systems that are not only self-contained. In other words, you don't have to have an ILS antenna and a glide slope antenna at that airport, but you can go to an airport out in the middle of nowhere and fly a somewhat precision approach to that runway. But there are some cases where they are kind of doing a hybrid system where you use the RNAV self-contained kind of an approach system, and also bringing in a component that is located on the ground that gives you even higher accuracy. So let's see, I think I may have clipped an article from Aviation Week. And yes, John Croft in Aviation Week and Space Technology writes that China has leapfrogged its international peers with what is arguably the world's most advanced display of precision navigation capability, a satellite-guided curved approach with multiple glide slopes that seamlessly terminate in automatic landings. And they're demonstrating this at Shanghai's Pudong International Airport, and a specially equipped China Eastern Airlines Airbus A321 and a Shandong Airlines Boeing 737-800. And it's using a system they call GBAS. I don't know how we pronounce that. GBAS, which is what does that stand for? Ground-based augmentation system. So there are some components that are on the ground that augment the self-contained RNAV or satellite system on the airplanes, and using satellite telemetry, etc., to make it very, very accurate. And looks like China is kind of leading the way with that. So now there are some airports here in our country, in the United States, systems developed by Hughes Aerospace. In fact, they helped draft this approach in China as well, in partnership with Honeywell. But here in the United States, I'm trying to find the list of airports that are using SmartPath, which is to date the only FAA certified, what do they call it? GLS, glide slope, global landing system. What does that G stand for? Or maybe that's the GPS. That's the G stands for GPS. So GPS landing system, so it's the only FAA certified GPS landing system on the market, called SmartPath. It's installed at several airports worldwide, including Newark, New Jersey, Houston, Frankfurt, and Sydney. And so anyway, that's... I know I'm not getting into a lot of detail here, and I'm sure that there are many out there, including Rick. Rick's not with me today, who could probably wax eloquently on all the intricacies of RNAV versus ILS systems. And maybe the next time I have him on with me, he can elaborate a little bit more than I have regarding that. But basically, I'd say, bottom line, just to simplify it as much as possible, an RNAV approach is an approach that can be completely self-contained in the airplane and doesn't rely on ground-based navigational aids. And an ILS system is one that relies exclusively on the instrument landing system, the ground-based navigational aids on the airport and the runways. Okay, so thank you, Stuart, by the way, for the question. Oh, but, I didn't even mention this at the very beginning, when I played this intro.
Welcome to Captain Jeff's Airline Pilot Guy show, the view from his side of the cockpit door.
That intro was from Phil Daley. He sent feedback in a previous episode regarding his Spotify list of flying songs, etc., that he shared with all of us. And he also recorded that intro. So I just want to make sure I gave credit where credit is due, and it's due to Phil Daley. Thank you, Phil, for doing that. Okay. Glynne writes, if you'd like to hear the other side of the story on the airplane hacking, check this interview out. Okay, this is the link that I was telling you about, that he was interviewed on this Security Weekly program. And by the way, I find it interesting. Maybe I missed it, but I listened to most of the interview on the show, and he never once mentioned in the show that he had actually successfully hacked an airplane and caused it to do something which was beyond the control of the pilots. He didn't say a thing about it. That's kind of curious, I think. I would think that if I'm on a security show, Security Weekly, and I claim that I did something, I would certainly, claim it loud and clear on a show like that. But I didn't hear a peep out of him regarding that. So, all right. Jay Chen writes, and by the way, some of you, when you fill out the feedback form on the website, if you go to airlinepilotguy.com and you go to the Contact Me page, And there's a form there that you can send feedback to me if you don't want to send just a plain old email to me at feedback@airlinepilotguy.com, which is the preferred way to do it. But if you use that form on the website, I don't know why, but now it's not giving me who it is from, except that, well, I mean, it does give me your email address, but it doesn't give me your name. And so if you don't mind, when you're using that form on the website, put somewhere in there, hey, this is Joe Chen, or I don't know what the J stands for Joe or not, but this is so-and-so, or sign it or whatever, so that I know who it is. I can give credit to whoever is sending me this feedback, okay? So, dear Captain Jeff, normally a go-around procedure is executed before the aircraft touches the runway surface. Is it still possible for a large aircraft to execute a go-around after the main gear has touched the runway? Is there enough time to go? Auto brakes off, spoilers retract, full power, flaps 20 to reach V1 and rotate. In the news, you hear the aviation pundits always talking about the pinger in an airline accident, especially in the high seas. Of course, they're talking about the pinger associated with the black box. However, I remember general aviation aircraft used to be equipped with 121.5 megahertz ELTs, emergency locator transmitters, that are G-force activated. I believe that the industry has already changed to the new 406 megahertz ELTs. Are the large transport category aircraft equipped with this ELT? If so, how many units per aircraft? Where are they located, and why the pundits do not talk about this? He says he stumbled upon my podcast through Chris Palmer's Aviator Cast. Thanks for your answers. Keep up the good work, and Cav OK. Well, thank you, JChen221. Yes, I think most of the, well, at least I know that at Acme, the airplanes that I fly have all transitioned to the newer 406 megahertz emergency locator transmitters. I'm not sure about everybody, if it's mandated for all Part 121 carriers now to use the 406 megahertz versions of the ELTs, or if they're still allowed to use the 121.5 megahertz versions. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Mechanic Bob or somebody out there can let us know about that, or maybe some other person who knows more about this kind of stuff will be able to chime in on that. The go-around procedure, is it possible that a go-around can be executed after the aircraft touches the runway surface? Well, let me answer it this way. If you are performing a missed approach procedure, which is a go-around in the setting of a missed approach, and during the missed approach procedure, if you're doing one of these very, very low visibility approaches, and let's say I'm flying a Category 3 approach, and at 50 feet on my airplane I don't see anything, I must execute the missed approach procedure, which is basically executing a go-around procedure. If I, in the course of that go-around, end up, or if the airplane ends up touching the main gear to the runway, that can happen, and our guidance tells us that might happen, but you continue to perform this procedure. Now, the difference between that and then doing a regular landing procedure, and then at some point after you've touched down deciding, you know what, I'm going to go around, that is not a good idea, because most airplanes these days especially have automatic spoiler deployment systems that either sense main wheel spin up, or a combination of that and the struts being compressed, and some airplanes as well, like mine, if the nose gear strut is compressed, any of those things will activate the automatic spoiler deployment system, and if you have the automatic braking system armed, that will initiate as well. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, anytime during a landing sequence when any of that has started, the spoilers coming up and the brakes coming on, or the thrust reverse activated, you're committed to landing. You are you're not allowed to do a go around from that point. Now, some of you are thinking, well, I remember doing touch and goes in my training days, and I even remember at Acme Airlines taking a 727 from Atlanta and flying it over to Greenville, Spartanburg, and with another, how many of us were in there? Like 3 or 4 trainee pilots, along with an instructor, and we'd go and shoot one after another and after another visual approaches in the at the runway or at the airport and doing touch and goes, and but that was a specially trained line check airman who was qualified to do that kind of training and knew all the procedures by heart so that it would be a safe thing to do. But as far as everyday flying, flying with passengers, etc., yeah, once you've touched down, unless you happen to be in the midst of a missed approach procedure and you just incidentally touch down, you are committed to a landing. So I hope that answers that question for you. And by the way, it depends on the airplane. I think somebody else asked me about the go-around procedure. And right offhand, I'm scrolling through my list of feedback, and I don't see that particular piece of feedback. But just in case I didn't put that in the queue, let me tell you how we execute a go-around procedure in the airplane that I fly. And what we do is we put in takeoff go-around power, toga power. So if the throttles are still connected, you just hit the toga button, or you say toga and you still hit the button and you manually advance the throttles to the go-around power setting. At the same time you're doing that, you're rotating the pitch of the airplane. You're rotating the nose upward. And so you toga power, and at the same time you're rotating the pitch up to get the airplane in the proper vector away from the ground. And then you call out flaps 15 to decrease the amount of drag. So you're going from the landing flap setting, either 28 or 40, to flaps 15. So you're taking away some of that drag, but you're still creating lift. And the person not flying, the person monitoring, pilot monitoring, the PM, will say, will look for an indication of a positive rate of climb, and then he or she should say positive rate. At that point, the pilot flying says gear up. So we put the landing gear up, and then we usually shoot for a target airspeed in the airplane that I'm flying, about 180 knots, and that's a good intermediate speed to keep the airplane partially configured to kind of get your wits about you and fly either the go-around procedure, the missed approach procedure, whatever, getting the airplane away from the ground, but not going so fast that you're blasting through and overspeeding things. So again, toga power, rotating the airplane, flaps 15, positive rate, gear up, speed select 180. And that's what we do. And on the Mad Dog at my airline. Now, if you're flying a different type of an airplane, like a 777, let's say, the go-around procedure is going to be a little bit different. If you're flying for a different airline, they may have different. Although I'd say most airlines, will use whatever the aircraft manufacturer suggests that you do for a go-around or a missed approach procedure. But anyway, so that's what we do, at least on the airplane that I fly at my airline. Okay, let's move on. Ryan writes some interesting articles about heads-up display systems came up on my Twitter feed just after listening to Airline Pilot Guy 166 and Danisha's question about HUDs. I've spoken with a pilot who has flown with a HUD in a bizjet, and he said he loved it after a while of getting used to it. He said that the capabilities that it brings to the flight deck are apparently very good. And he included in his feedback a few links regarding HUD systems and optimum awareness, etc. And so I'll include those in the show notes as well, so you can check them out. So thank you very much, Ryan. You may have noticed last episode, in addition to...
We're going green. We're going green. We're gonna take care of the earth. We're going green.
I played that several times in the last show. And by the way, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll note that I mentioned that I can't get this song out of my head, and apparently many of you who listen to the show and kind of follow our Twitter feeds are having the same trouble getting it out of their heads. And you know what? I'm not sorry for it. But that's not what I'm trying to make a point about right now. This right here.
Potable.
I played that a few times in the last show, and the reason that I'm mentioning it right now is I didn't give credit to Tim Van Ram. He's the one that sent me the feedback saying that potable sounds really good with the United Kingdom pronunciation.
Potable.
And I agree. Thank you, Tim. We'll hear more from Tim as we move on with the show here. Let's see. Frik in South Africa writes, Naughty Delta. Thanks for your effort. And even though I love the show when it was just you, that guy from Miami, forgot his name, and the doc just add to the dynamic of the show. I, for one, appreciate the time and effort you, Dr. Steph, and Miami Rick put in to share your knowledge with us. Thank you, Frik. I do appreciate that point of data, your feeling about that. Yeah, this is one of my old school solo efforts, so it's kind of different, not having somebody to bounce stuff off of. But anyway, regarding the below article, I have no set opinion since we only have the dad's side of the events. I'm sure that Delta Airlines will investigate, and if they were in the wrong, they'll fix it. Those darn computers, they're so adamant they are so adamant should fly the planes quite often make unintended mistakes. Once again, we don't have all the facts. So this is an article from insider.foxnews.com. This dad said, Delta charged me $88 to sit next to my 4-year-old daughter. The father of a 4-year-old says that the airline charged him an extra $88 to sit next to his daughter. Frank Strong said in a recent blog post that he was traveling from Raleigh, North Carolina to Montgomery, Alabama with his 4-year-old daughter when it happened. He said that Delta's website asked for his child's age when he booked his tickets, and yet the company assigned her a seat 11 rows away. Strong said he spoke with a ticket agent at the airport who told him he could pay $88 to switch seats or try asking a gate agent during boarding to switch his seat for free. In his blog post, he wrote, faced with the dilemma of handing over ransom money in exchange for certainty or taking a risk that an agent might fix the problem at the gate, I opted to pay. No parent holds a higher responsibility or more deeply visceral instinct than keeping their child or children safe. That's hard to accomplish 11 rows away when the fasten seatbelt sign is glowing. The airlines are counting on it. Indeed, I'd contend airlines, including Delta, prey on such emotions to separate a few more dollars from the consumer wallet. When Strong boarded, he learned that there were plenty of empty seats on the flight. Yet, he had just paid $88, in addition to $1,200 in airline tickets to get 2 seats next to each other. Fox and Friends said that Delta is currently investigating what happened to Strong. Now, I have a few questions myself. It seems like maybe only parts of the story are being told by this guy on his blog. I'm thinking when you go online and you book a flight, don't you have the opportunity to pick your seats? I thought you did. I mean, even I, when I'm traveling as a deadheading crew member, have the ability to look at the seating diagram and to pick the seats that I want. Is it that when he was booking the flight, the only 2 seats that he could get on these flights were not next to each other, and he thought, no big deal, I'll do this, and then when I get to the airport, they'll switch seats and we'll be able to sit together. Is that the case? Or did he, when he was booking his flight and picking his seats, pick 2 seats right next to each other? And then when he showed up at the airport, they go, nope, I'm sorry, you're not sitting next to each other. That's possible, but I don't know. I'd like to know that piece of information. And again, he even admits that he didn't have to pay this $88 fee to switch the seats. And then he found out, turns out he really He shouldn't have, because there were a whole bunch of empty seats. He didn't even attempt to ask the gate agent when he arrived at the gate to, move the seats together, because he'd already, taken the sure thing and paid the $88. I think what happened here is that he was thinking, well, I got to spend the extra money just to make sure that I'm sitting next to my daughter. And then he got on the airplane and went, son of a gun, look at all these empty seats. That's $88 I just wasted. That's probably what happened. But now, as far as, I know you want to sit next to your kids, especially a 4-year-old. I don't blame you, Dad. But, I've seen situations where 4-year-olds were by themselves traveling with nobody on the airplane they were related to. So I think maybe not 4-year-olds. I forgot what the minimum age is. But anyway, I don't know. There are so many things that you could say about this and so many details that we don't know. And as you say, Frik, we're only getting the dad side of the story. I'd like to hear the airline side of events to see what happened. I mean, the airline wasn't even given the opportunity to make a seemingly bad deal, make it right. So anyway, let's move on. Brad Larson sent me some audio feedback. Take it away, Brad.
Hey, Captain Jeff. Brad Larson from Phoenix, Arizona, giving you a feedback. Just curious, when I'm at work sometimes, at one of my different jobs, I work underneath the runway to Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Depends on which way the traffic's going, but usually at the time I'm talking about, it's the approach end of the runway. Phoenix has 3 runways, 25 left, 25 right, and 26. And sometimes I'll notice a plane will be lined up to, say, land on 25 right, and it'll make a quick turn, and I'm maybe 2 miles from the end of the runway. It'll make a quick turn and line up for 26. Or let's say the airplane will be coming in and line up for 26, and it'll make a quick bank and then look like it's lined up for 25. Just curious if you know what would cause that at the last minute. And it seems to happen pretty often, so is this something to do with the way they're just flowing traffic? Was the plane supposed to be going to 26 and they ended up going to 27? Or, 26 and then decided to go to 25. Anyways, just curious if you would have any idea what caused it. I mean, it happens often, so I mean, it's probably something that happens to you all the time. Curious if you've ever had that happen. Anyways, let me know. Enjoy the show. Thanks for all your hard work. And I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, I can tell you with almost complete certainty that it's not the situation where the pilots are going, okay, we're going to land on this. Oh, wait, is that the right? Are we on the correct? Oh, we're not supposed to land on this runway. We're supposed to go to this one, and then kind of do a yank and bank and switch over to the one that they were assigned. I don't. Now, I'm not saying that never happens, but very, very rarely I would say that would happen. I think what is happening, and based on my own anecdotal experience, is that we have several airports around the country, around the world actually, but especially around this country, I fly domestically, that have airport, the way the airport is set up and the runways are set up and the terminals, etc., where you might land, let's take Dallas-Fort Worth, for instance. That Metroplex has, how many runways do they have now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 runways, maybe more. Maybe they built a few since I've been in there last. But they have at least 5 parallel runways, north-south runways. And they assign your runway based upon where you're coming in, from where you're coming in. So if you're coming in from the West Coast or somewhere west of Dallas-Fort Worth, in general, they'll, if it's busy and you have a lot of airplanes coming in from a lot of directions, they're very likely going to assign you one of the runways on the west side of the airport. Now, if you are Acme Airlines and your terminal is on the east side of the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, as Acme's gates are and terminal, you would rather land on that side of the airport because it's going to be a lot more convenient and it's going to be a lot more expeditious to get to your gate after you land. So and the controllers know this. They know that if you're an Acme flight coming in from Los Angeles to Dallas-Fort Worth, that you would rather land on, let's say they're landing to the south, on runway 17 right, 17 center, or 17 left, to be on that side of the airport. Although, a lot of times if they don't offer, when we check in with them on approach control, that the option to switch to one of those runways on the other side of the airport, we may ask, hey, if it's available, would you mind if we were assigned one of those runways? Orlando's another airport that comes to mind when we're coming in from Atlanta and our terminal is on the eastern side of the airport, and they initially will assign us one of the runways on the west side, and they'll usually say, runway assignment 18 right, and we have your request in for 17 left or 17 right. So they know that we would rather land on a runway that is closer to where our terminal is. Time is money and extra fuel and the whole bit. So that's a situation that you might be lined up for one runway and then change to a different runway. Houston's another one. Houston Intercontinental. You're coming in and they may initially assign you 8 left, and then they realize that the way the traffic is going to flow and there's nobody waiting for takeoff, why don't you take the inboard runway 8 right? We know that you probably prefer that, because if you land on 8 left at Houston Intercontinental, it's a big drive from that runway all the way to the terminal buildings. So, or even an airport like Atlanta, where the parallel runways on the north complex, the north side and the south complex are pretty close together. But you might be coming in for, let's say, 26 right, and you'll look at the taxiway for the people going out for takeoff, and there's nobody heading out for 26 left. And you may say, hey, we have the runways in sight, and, could we sidestep to runway 26 left? And, if the controller thinks that that's a good idea, he'll re-clear you, sidestep runway 26 left. Or he may ask you to do that, or whatever. So, and it's up to the pilot whether or not you accept that. So if you're initially assigned a runway and you're coming in and then all of a sudden another option becomes available, the tower controller may say, would you like to sidestep to land on this runway? And you can say, nope, I'm all stabilized here. I'm already briefed for this runway. I'm not going to make a last minute change, and I'm going to stick with that. And that's perfectly acceptable. So it's up to the pilots to decide whether or not to accept a sidestep maneuver. But that's generally what's happening. Sometimes things get kind of bunched up. I've had a few instances in my career where I've been lined up for a certain runway, and for some reason the spacing's not working out very well, or maybe the preceding airplane has slowed down way too early, and the required amount of spacing is just not there, and the controller will say, Acme 443, you're cleared to land sidestep, on the other runway. And again, you can say yay or nay on that. But if the spacing is bad, if you say nay, then they're going to say, okay, well then turn right heading so-and-so, climb maintain 4,000 feet, we'll vector you back around for another landing attempt. So in general, if we feel comfortable with it and it's all safe and it's good weather and all that kind of stuff, we'll usually accept the sidestep maneuver too. And you don't want to do it too late either, because even if the runways are close together, if you are very low to the ground and you get a sidestep clearance, that's something that we don't accept, because that's just, you don't want to be yanking and banking, rocking and rolling an airplane very close to the ground. Just not a good thing to do unless you're in a fighter, a military fighter. All right, so hopefully that answered your question, Brad Larson in Phoenix. Okay, now this is from Owen Shimizu. He actually phonetically spelled it out for me. He says, I know you have trouble with pronouncing my Irish-Japanese name, so here's how to pronounce it. E-O-I-N is the Irish way of spelling Owen, And Shimizu is the Japanese name, and he spelled it out phonetically. Shimizu. So Owen Shimizu writes, it's an interesting video. He sends me a link to a YouTube video explaining what drone racing is all about. But is it safe? In my opinion, not very. Take a look at the video and you can see the harm and damage that these drones can cause. The race that's shown in the video looks to me like it was done in a public park where there are people walking on the various trails. I don't know how others feel, but this is like dirt bikes being raced around in a public park. Not safe. It looks like this sport is only going to get bigger, more popular, and utilize drones with ever-increasing power and speed, which will only decrease the safety margin. Imagine walking down a trail in a park and to have one of these drones buzz past your ear, missing you by inches. I don't have a problem with the sport in and of itself, but I feel like there should be designated areas for this, just like any other motorsport. That's my 2 cents regarding drone racing. Blue skies and tailwinds. Owen Shimizu. And Owen, I looked at the video, and I think that it does kind of look like a public park. I agree with you, but all the people that I saw in the video were people that were involved in this sport. I think it was not a public setting. I think it was a private area. I don't think that was endangering any of the public safety. I could be wrong, but yeah, that was my impression from it. And I don't have a problem at all with them doing this in a controlled area, in a controlled setting. And the damage that Owen was talking about was, they're trying to fly these things through like hoops and various gates and that kind of thing. And sometimes they end up hitting the material that's hanging down from these hoops or whatever, and doing some damage to the material, tearing it off, or even damage to the drones themselves. And yeah, I agree with you, Owen. If that hits somebody in the head, it's going to definitely it's going to cause a bruise or worse. So, but that's my take on it. But I thank you for your opinion as well. And if you're listening to the show, look for that link in the show notes, drone racing on YouTube. And they're using these, what do they call that, first-person view systems? It's probably not the right term for it, but they have cameras mounted on these quadcopter drones, and then they have some kind of telemetry that is giving that data to these goggles that they're wearing, and through the goggles they're seeing what the camera is viewing on the drone itself. So you feel like you're in the drone. That looks like it'd be a lot of fun. I would enjoy doing that. And so they're racing each other out there, and so a lot of good footage. Check out the video. I'm not sure who sent this to me. It was sent via the feedback from the Airline Pilot Guy site. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't put your name in there, and maybe I can fix that, but right now, as it is, if you don't put your name somewhere in the feedback itself, I don't know who it was that sent it to me. So I'm going to say this was sent to me by Anonymous. First robot-based flight simulator. A link in flyingmagazine.com, flyingmag.com, talking about this. I believe it was a... Oh, shoot. Let me click on it again and see what aircraft manufacturer this thing was simulating. I think it was a Cirrus. The internet here in the hotel room is not the best in the world, but I'm not going to complain because I'm not paying for it. But, well, maybe I will start complaining because it's just not loading up. And now an ad for some kind of prescription medication. I love those, don't you? All right, I'm going to give it a few more seconds here, see if anything loads. But it's basically this very robotic-looking arm, and at the end of the arm is a cockpit setup, and these huge screens with scenes, video being projected on them or through them or whatever, and it looks very realistic, and it's a full motion thing. And the name of the article says, first robot volume down a little bit. First robot-based flight simulator. Pilot training in the world's first robot-based flight simulator developed by DLR in cooperation with Groenewald Maschinenbau. It's a German company, apparently. And let's see. It is the Diamond aircraft, DA-40. Okay, so it shows a guy walking up into the cockpit of this thing. And it looks like a robot prehistoric monster that he's kind of just getting into the head of it. And then this thing fires up on this big articulated arm and brings the cockpit up. And yeah, you know what? Just check it out yourself. Link in the show notes. And basically, the question was, do you think that the airlines will get simulators like this? Well, I don't know. The full motion simulators that we have been using for many years are pretty sophisticated, and they do the trick for what we are, what our training emphasizes. And the airlines have spent a lot. The airlines have spent a lot of money on these systems, and I'm not sure if the airlines will get simulators like maybe like replacement new airplanes that come out into the future. Perhaps simulators like this one in the Flying Magazine video will be more and more commonplace. But I don't see airlines going, "Ooh, that's cool. Let's go ahead and scrap all the ones we have now and buy these newfangled ones." I don't know even if they make them yet for air transport category airplanes yet. But I could see these maybe in the future, and the simulation technology getting better and better and better. But I don't know. Take a check or look at that video and see what you think. Rodney says, sorry for multiple feedbacks, but I just heard the feedback on the P-51 ain't misbehaving, and it was at the 70 years since VE Day this past weekend at Dulles, and I got to get up close and personal with it. This is so cool. I got to see the 50 caliber ammunition belts on it. All right. Very cool, Rodney. Thank you for sharing with us that. Alan says, during episode 166, you mentioned the plot of a book where all power around the world was lost for 2 minutes, which caused many aircraft to fall from the sky. I can think of a number of books with a plot in which all power was lost. The book I believe is most likely that you were talking about was written by Robert J. Sawyer, called Flash Forward. Yes, that's it. Flash Forward. It wasn't the book, actually. I guess this was a television series based on this book, and it was called Flash Forward. He says, in this story, everyone on Earth jumps forward for a period of 2 minutes and 17 seconds. If during that period of time your plane or car were to have crashed, you would not be returned after the 2 minutes and 17 seconds. I really like that story and many other books written by this author. Again, that's Robert J. Sawyer. If there is another book which more closely matches your description, I guess I'll hear about it in episode 167. Well, you will not hear about it in episode 167 because this is episode 168. Never got around to your feedback. I'm sorry about that. But just so many things to do, so many questions to answer. But I'm getting it at 168, so that's not bad. And nobody else chimed in with that, Alan. And thank you. It was the series, the television series that I was talking about was Flash Forward, and I really enjoyed watching it. So thank you. Appreciate that. Daniel. It was Daniel Matisse that said he's going to be training on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner in Miami the end of this month through the first part of July. And so I'll be in Miami on the 23rd of June and Fort Lauderdale on the 24th. So, hey, let's do it, Daniel. Let's have some kind of a meetup. Let's see, are there any other people that are down there in the Miami area? I can't think of any. Anyway, Daniel says, hey, Captain, here's the link to an article I read today that pretty much talks about Boeing's project to train cadet pilots from scratch to meet the future demands of pilots. And then he has the link out of BloombergView.com. And so I'll put that in the show notes if you want to check it out yourself. You know how to do it. All right. Thank you, Daniel. Captain Al writes, "Hi, Jeff, Steph, and Rick." Okay, Steph, Rick, if you're listening. "Sorry, LVPs slipped through my acronym filter. LVPs are low visibility procedures that airfields go into when the visibility and or cloud base falls below set limits. This then leads to movement restrictions on the airfield, and air traffic control slots are issued due to the reduced takeoff and landing capacity. Eurocontrol issues calculated takeoff times, or slots, as they are called, for flights when congestion at the origin, en route, or destination exists or is anticipated, and therefore LVPs can result in significant delays. The idea is to avoid holding point delays and airborne holding patterns. Of course, like any system, it's not perfect. Airlines, when submitting their flight plans, state their landing capability, so it's quite common for a Category 3 capable Airbus to receive no delay, whereas a Cat 2 capable Embraer will receive a significant delay. How does flow management work in the United States? My only experience has been arriving from across the pond, and I think it's very similar to what you just described there. That preference will be given to airplanes with the greater capabilities for low visibility approaches. Let's see, he goes on. "A few episodes back, you commented on some landings at a few UK airfields, Birmingham and Leeds Bradford. As you quite rightly said in the past, that camera angles and lenses can exaggerate the image. However, both of these airfields are well known to UK pilots. We have a lot of single runway airfields in the UK, and whether it be by design or natural phenomena, they aren't oriented into the wind. Birmingham is locally known as the crosswind center of excellence because it's so often more than 25 knots across. For a variety of reasons, the 2,000 and 1,000 foot winds can be significantly different to each other and the surface. This is why you see a fair amount of rock and roll on the video. Leeds is even worse, as it sits on top of a hill, has a convex-shaped runway, and a 3.4 degree approach. And just for good measure, Manchester, where all the famous Monarch photos were taken, has from time to time horrible turbulence caused by hills, valleys, and buildings. The day of the photo I was flying, and the surface wind for runway 23 right was 330 degrees, 45, gusting 57. When I left the hold, wow, and 280, 42, gust 51 when I touched down 5 minutes later. To quote the American Boeing 767 pilot behind me after their go-around, that was like trying to fly through a whirlpool of wind. In these conditions, still within the company-imposed crosswind limit, it is essential on the Airbus to keep the wings level and accept the crabbed landing, as an excessive roll can lead to damage. The addition of sharklets to many Airbuses, the sharklets are the little, the winglets are going up, but the sharklets have the winglets going up and like a little bit of a winglet going downwards as well. They increase the risk of a strike. 5 degrees of roll will remove a sharklet. Ooh, wow. Our company limits for crosswinds are for the Airbus 320 and 321 39 knots, which leads me to think, what is it on the Mad Dog, and whether it's pleasant, right on the limit, or a handful? It's a handful. It's not pleasant at all. And our crosswind limit for the Mad Dog is 30 knots. If any of the APG community have any European-based questions, I'm happy to assist. And if I don't know the answer, Pilot Pip, who is far more knowledgeable than I, is bound to. Jeff, I listen to many weekly podcasts each week, and yours is the first one I hit play on. The input from Steph and Rick has been a great addition, but you're still the main man. Or to quote my 5-year-old, you're the big daddy. Perhaps I should join Acme, where there's no crew food and shed a few kilos. Keep the shiny side up, Captain Al. Thank you, Captain Al, so much for your feedback. And no, it's not helping me at all. They don't have crew meals on our domestic flights, but they do on our international flights. And even with the fact that I'm not provided meals by Acme, doesn't stop me from continuing to feed my face with all kinds of junk. So I don't think, for me, it's not working. I'm not shedding a few kilos at all. I need to. I know I've talked about it. I'm doing better. I got better. Okay. Thank you, Captain Al, for your feedback. Always appreciated. Let's see. This is from Paul Thorpe. He says, I've sent you a couple of emails and a voice feedback in the past. Now I can hopefully contribute something other than questions. I regularly listen to a science-based podcast called The Naked Scientists. This week, they've dedicated a portion of the program to aviation, and I thought I'd share it with the APG community. It's about 30 minutes in total, and breakdown is below. The engines piece is probably the most interesting, as a lot of the rest is fairly basic. And it's available from www.thenakedscientists.com. Don't worry, I don't think there are really naked scientists on these. At least I don't think so. The aviation stuff starts on, and then he has a breakdown time codes of when they talk about Rolls Royce engines and when they talk about health of passengers and the spread of disease, a piece on radar, environmental impact on aviation.
We're going green. We're going green.
And a basic explanation of black boxes. So I'll put all that information in the show notes as well with the link. And by the way, normal feedback. The UK isn't that big, and it's only recently that I took my first domestic flight. Although technically even that was an international flight going from England to Scotland. Not having immigration and customs to do, I was amazed at how quickly, after reaching the gate, I was landside and out of the airport. That got me wondering, how quickly does the flight crew normally walk out to your car or train home, assuming it's the last leg of a trip and there is no transfers and hotels, etc.? How long do the checklists paperwork take, or is it a case of hitting a big off button and skipping off up the air bridge? Clear skies, unlimited visibility, and winds from the front or behind. Thank you, Paul. Thanks again for the link to the Naked Scientists, and again, I'll put that in the show notes. As far as how long it takes, not very long. We just, we stand at the door, or at least I stand at the door. Our company operations manual tells us that we are required to, as pilots, say goodbye to our passengers. And I've talked about this before. Many of my fellow pilots are not doing that lately. They're just, cutting out, especially if it's the last flight. Now, I understand if you have if you're a commuter and you have a tight connection, you got to make that flight. That's understandable. But at least one of you should say goodbye to the customers. Anyway, I digress. So I wait and say goodbye to everybody as they're getting off the airplane. And usually it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes for everybody to get off the airplane, depending on how full the airplane is. And then after that, there's really no paperwork to do. You make sure that all the switches are in the correct position. You've remembered to shut off the engines and perhaps shut down the APU and make sure the ground power and ground air is all connected. And then you just grab your stuff and walk up the jetway and head for the bus to the parking lot, or the train, in my case, most of the time. And so it can be, as little as 30 minutes before I'm actually, heading away from the airport. So not bad, actually. Don't have to go through customs or immigration or anything like that on the kind of trips that I do, unless we're coming back from a flight coming in from the Caribbean or whatever. Then you have to go through all the hassle of customs and all that kind of stuff. So that's another reason why I don't like doing the Caribbean stuff on the airplane that I fly. Let's see. Kappa writes, "Pardon me for having some fun." Here, let me make sure I have this set up. I don't. What happened here? Just a quick memento. Let me get this file ready to go, because I'm going to need to play it. Where is 167? Did I delete it? Oh no. Oh no. Okay. Let me just take a little extra time here to copy it. Go over here to my browser and type in translate.google.com, and then I'm going to type this in, and then I'll be ready to play it. Okay, no, it's not French. Detect language, and it's Swedish, and English it's going to pronounce. Okay, here we go. Now, back to Kappa. Pardon me for having some fun, but could you please repeat the name of the Swedish airport?
Örnsköldsvik.
Örnsköldsvik. Now, how about saying Örnsköldsvik, just for the fun of it? You know, that means pardon in Danish. The Swedish airport, however, is Eagle Shields Cove. While I'm sure Captain Potable has some audible effects handy, try using Google Translate's listen function next time you run across a butcher-worthy name. Have fun, butcher, and drink a quart for King Quart. Kappa. And so, yeah, he was having a little fun with the fact that I was having some trouble pronouncing this Swedish word that has all these umlauts in it.
Örnsköldsvik.
And actually, it turns out it's not really that difficult to pronounce. Örnsköldsvik.
Örnsköldsvik.
There we go. Thank you, Kappa. Always making fun of my pronunciation. Let's see. Nigel writes, after listening to APG Flight 166, there was some reference to hand flying for flight sim pilots and what controls were used. I thought I would share what I use in my home cockpit setup. I spent about a year researching this and 3 years building it. Total cost about £3,000 here in the UK. Wow. That is a lot of money. That's got to be approaching £5,000 US dollars. I mean, $5,000. This was the best stage of build I got to before I stopped building and eventually took it all apart. And then he sent me a YouTube video of it. I'm the guy in the black top in the video. This was modeled on the A320, A330 flight deck because it lended itself well to the methods I used to build this cockpit. It was a labor of love, and I amassed over 1,000 hours flying on VATSIM, which I adore. I always wanted to be a pilot, but I've put that dream aside at this stage of my life. I don't believe anyone should ever say or think that it's too late. I just have different goals now in my 40s than going to flight school and taking on a colossal debt. My respect to you. The show is fantastic, and so is the community. You seem to have a huge number of fans who all strike me as very decent, good people. And you're right, Nigel. I think everybody I've met and corresponded with are very decent, good people, except for Miami Rick. Rick and Dr. Steph are great to listen to as well. The first episode I listened to was with the dispatcher following the shoot-down of Malaysia 17. That was fascinating. The whole storyline about the news bumper and your peaceful voice had me in stitches of laughter. Please keep doing what you do. It's terrific. And this is Nigel Doyle from Ireland via UK. Thank you very much, sir. And again, I hope I get the chance to meet you when you're in Orlando next week. That'll be a lot of fun. And thank you very much for your kind words. And the link to your YouTube video will be in the show notes if anybody wants to check out your setup. And you know what? Speaking of that, here, let me make sure that I keep this place in the list. You were talking about people becoming pilots at various stages in their lives. And I wanted to read this. I just got this in yesterday. This is from David. My name is David from Houston, Texas, and I've been a recreational pilot for approximately 13 years now. Have all my ratings and more than enough time for today's hiring standards. Last year, I had a life-changing moment, also known as a divorce, that pushed me to explore other options for my career besides the work I've been doing for corporate America. With careful planning, especially economically and not having kids to care for, I have decided to take the plunge and begin interviewing with 2 regional airlines. The second Acme Regional Airline interviewed me with a 45-question ATP-style exam, panel interview, and one-on-one. After an entire morning of interviewing, I was offered the job, and I begin my training in June. Yay! Congratulations! I look forward to this exciting new career, and as a late bloomer, being 39 years of age. Again, he's 39. I have no more time to waste. I just want to share my story with many that are listening that are considering taking the plunge. Just go for it, but plan accordingly. Anything is possible if you're chasing a dream. Again, David, I'm psyched, man. That's great. Congratulations. My second part of this feedback is a question for you or any of the APG listeners who have experience flying the Embraer 145. What kind of headsets do they recommend for this aircraft? I understand that noise-canceling headphones can be essential in a noisy cockpit like that of the 145. Thanks in advance. Keep up the great show. Future First Officer David for an Acme Regional Airline. That's so cool. I don't know, at your airline, you might want to kind of wait until you're in training, kind of get a feel for, what the pilots are using at that Acme Regional Airline and the Embraer 145. But I want to make clear something. Even if they aren't wearing the larger headsets like the one that I wear, the Bose Aviation X or the Bose A20, I think it's the latest version of that headset with active noise reduction, I want you to consider doing it anyway, because you're going to be amazed at how quickly your hearing is going to deteriorate. It's a very noisy environment, and just ask any of us who have been flying jets for many, many, many years, especially our mid to upper frequency ranges are just gone or very heavily affected by the very noisy environment we find ourselves working in which we find ourselves working, I should say. And so that was the decision that I had made back in 1999, 2000 when I checked out as captain on the 727. At that point I've been flying in very noisy cockpits for about 12 years, and then another 6 years before that in the Air Force. And I thought, what? I probably should have done this sooner, but right around that time frame is when all these active noise reduction headsets were being introduced, and I'm thinking, I really need to pay attention to this and do something about protecting what little hearing I have left. And so I really highly recommend whatever you choose that it be some kind of a active noise reduction headset, and the bigger the better, I say. But use your judgment, kind of ask around at that airline, what everybody's using, but I would not sacrifice your hearing for just being cool and fitting in. So that's my 2 cents worth regarding that. So again, congratulations, David. Hope to see you around one of these days. Okay, so I'm going to jump back up to where I was in the notes, but I just wanted to read that because Nigel had said, that it just wasn't right for him in his stage of life, but I just wanted to show you another perspective from somebody who was a little bit later in their life, and they went ahead and made the jump and are very happy. At least I hope that David will be happy. He hasn't really started yet, so we'll see. It's going to be hard, but I think the rewards at the end of the tunnel, David, are worth it. Okay, Ed in ORD says, Okay, here we go. Hi, Captain Jeff. Love your podcast as always, and really love Miami, Rick, and I really love Miami and the Doc on the show. However, that does throw a wrench into my listening at 1.5 speed, as when they speak, I have to slow them down. Can we petition for a 45-second jump button in place of the 15-second jump button in iTunes? Seriously, though, thanks for the great podcast, and if you need beer glasses delivered to LHR, it's Heathrow, I believe, I am there about once a month from Chicago. Stay safe, Ed in Chicago O'Hare. Thank you, Ed. Yeah, I'll tell Miami Rick and Dr. Steph that when they're on the show, they need to slow down. They need to talk slow like me. And as far as thank you very much for the kind offer for the I meant to mention that at the very beginning of the show. I am keeping a list of those who have requested mugs and pint glasses. What I need from you is your mailing address and then and your email address, the one that's associated with your PayPal account if you have a PayPal account. And then I'll send in an invoice to you via PayPal when I ship them. How many have I shipped so far? 0. I've been so busy I haven't had a chance. They're in boxes on my basement floor, and I'm gathering the necessary materials and such to hopefully get some sent out between this trip and the next trip. But I do apologize. I've not been able to get those things out the door. I don't have a shipping department at Airline Pilot Guy headquarters, so it's just me. And so I do apologize for not having any of those sent out yet. And another thing that I did, if you're listening and you're interested in a Acme Airlines designed by Jim Mercado, an Acme Airlines beer glass, a pint glass, or a coffee mug, just go back a couple episodes and you'll see pictures of those. If you're interested, send an email to merch@airlinepilotguy.com, and that way I can filter those messages and kind of put them in the appropriate place. I don't want to miss anybody's request for a coffee mug or a beer glass. So again, MERCH at airlinepilotguy.com. And that will get into my Gmail account, and I have a filter set up to put it in a certain place so I can keep track of all these things. And then if for some reason I run out of coffee mugs and beer glasses before I fulfill your order, just know that I will be making another order, and at some point in the future, your beer glass and or coffee mug will be on its way to you. As far as shipping internationally, I'm working one-on-one with individuals. I have a couple in the UK and one in Australia who has inquired about the shipping costs, and I'm going to do a little bit of research on that and let you know how much it's going to be. So I'm not really making any money on these things. I'm just paying for the cost of having them produced by another third party, and then the shipping costs, which is a bulk of the money that I'm charging for them. Okay, so thank you for the offer, Ed in Chicago, and trust me, it's just a lot easier for me to, because Miami Rick had said the same thing. Hey, I'm going to be up in Amsterdam several times. I can take some of these glasses with me. But the problem is then once you get there, then you're going to have to figure out how to ship them to people within Europe, so it's just kind of a mess. So forget it. I'll take care of it. Thank you for the offer anyway, though. Okay. Who sent this to me? Did I send it to myself? I may have. Well, I'm not going to read it. I don't know where it came from. I will quickly do this one. Don Sebastian. He sent me an email a while back, and he said that he enjoyed the podcast. And he has been on a couple other aviation podcasts. He is a flight instructor, a mechanic, test pilot, still traveling the world doing pre-purchase inspections. He was on Airplane Geeks episode 336 and Inspired Pilot episode 8. So check those out. And he writes to me a second piece of feedback. He said, Airborne Dawn here again, just listening to Airline Pilot Guy number 53 at about the 1 hour 40-minute time frame. You informed me about the requirements for flying in the jump seat. Being that I commute to work checking out airplanes, being a ATP, about 20 years ago, I used to request the jump seat when the plane was full. Because of 9/11, never even realized that this option was still available. So here's a jump seat story. Atlanta to Raleigh-Durham one night, allowed in the jump seat of a 727. So obviously this happened before 9/11. Soon after climb out, the Raleigh-Durham ATIS was tuned in. There was some weather, but the announcement was airport closed. One crew member contacted RDU to find the reason. Disabled airplane on the runway. Back then, RDU still had 2 runways, but for some reason the other runway wasn't an option for this flight. Yeah, I think back then, Don, the 2 runways, one was a very short runway, and then one was the air carrier runway. And now since then we have 2 air carrier runways in addition to the others. Okay, back to your feedback. So being an AMP mechanic, wait a minute. Discussion about an alternate and other maintenance matters I'm not free to discuss. We continued to RDU. Being an AMP mechanic, I suggested to request the type of disabled airplane and what the problem was. The request was answered. It was a Beechcraft Baron. The brakes were locked. It was late at night, and no maintenance was available to help. I suggested if some person had a wire clipper and an adjustable wrench, or I believe a 5/16 wrench. After clipping off the safety wire, the brakes could be unbolted at the wheels. Ground control said they will give it a try. We made a pass at Raleigh-Durham and pointed towards Greensboro. A few minutes later, to the crew's relief, the tower reported that the disabled airplane was off the runway. A quick 180-degree turn, and we landed at RDU. I guess this would not happen in today's restrictive world. So, question. If you were the captain, and the year is 2015, and for a maintenance reason you would rather get to RDU, would this same request for action be made? All the good numbers. Don. Thank you, Don. If I understand your question correctly, if it's the same kind of situation, it's late at night, sure. And if I had somebody with me on the jump seat that was knowledgeable of, the bits and pieces of various airplanes, absolutely, I would do it. I don't see what the problem would be. So very cool. Thank you again for the anecdotal feedback. Let's see, who sent this to me? Oh, this is kind of a story related to the Chris Roberts, security hacker guy. Maybe he could start a podcast. Airplane Hacker Guy, airlinehackerguy.com. United Airlines will give you up to 1 million miles for finding security bugs. Now, I think the whole premise of this thing was like United was inviting people to break into their the seat boxes underneath some of the seats in their in-flight entertainment system. No. Onboard Wi-Fi entertainment systems or avionics systems are not part of this offer. I think they're more specifically talking about the United Airlines website or their apps. But if you can find any security bugs, they're willing to give out some free miles. So if you're one of those IT guys or know a lot about that stuff, there you go. Mike Neiman, okay, he's one of the ones that sent me feedback regarding Chris Roberts. Let me keep moving on here. Nick Carson mentioned an article in thestreet.com where the Boeing 767 was ranked the second best wide body by United Airlines passengers. The first was the new 787 Dreamliner. Frik again. He says, fun ride, flying the Typhoon through the Mach loop at low level. It's a YouTube video, definitely worth watching. Two-ship, low-level formation in the UK, and the pilot of the wingman is, that's where the whole video is shot, and he is giving us a play-by-play blow of how many G's they're pulling and what they're doing, and it's very interesting. So if you're an aviation geek in the least bit, you need to check out this this video on YouTube of the Typhoon flying through the Mach loop at low level. Janelle writes, someone on your last show asked about airport beacons and the lights that are used. Upon another quick Googling, it looks like the best answer might be that the lights are the colors they are because the FAA says so. That's just like Janelle saying, like the mom. Well, it's because I said so. Just do it. Anyway, so they have a ton of specifics in this document that she's included here, FAA.gov document about airport beacons, I guess. About how and where the lights are to be used and how they are to be tested, etc. Also, since flashing and solid red lights are used to mark tall obstructions, green would kind of make logical sense. Got to get back to work. Got to get back to work, but here's the link in case anyone wants to check it out for themselves. I'll have that link in the show notes if you want to check it out yourself. Thanks as always for the awesome podcast, Blue Skies, and Tasty Java, Janelle. Again, Janelle, it was so nice meeting you in St. Louis. That was a lot of fun. Okay, continuing on. Let's keep moving, Jeff. How are we doing on time? Looks like around 2 hours. Let's see. This is from James Keene. He says, James here, James Keene, James Dean, whatever. I've been called much worse.
Jimmy Dean. James Dean.
James Keene. I thought this article below was well done, sent to me by Steve. I guess he's an Acme guy. In copy. How many articles in major publications take the time to differentiate between pressure altitude, MSL, and AGL? As an aside, the parallax web design for the article is also fantastic. Hopefully, your listeners will enjoy. Good beer, clear skies, long runways, tailwinds, nice views, squeaker landings, good layovers in warm places with nice hotel rooms, and all of that other stuff, but not necessarily in that order. James. Boy, I hope you have a shortcut for that. A keyboard shortcut so you don't have to type that every time. Let's see. P.S. I meant to say 3 episodes ago I sent feedback and an article or two about automated flying, the robot, first officer, etc. I should have made this clearer and make no mistake about it. I am an active private pilot myself, and I think putting anything other than a well-fed, well-rested, and well-trained and current human to pilot an aircraft is a terrible idea. Just wanted to make that uber clear. Okay, so I'll put a link to this interactive website in the show notes. And you know what? I hate to admit this, but I don't think I ever got around. I have one of the tabs, or I did, open to it, and I never actually explored it. And it's from the New York Times, interactive. In Flight, en route from London to Tokyo, a pilot's eye view of life in the sky by Mark Vonnegut. And I think he's the same guy that wrote that book that Stan in Philadelphia recommended to me, Skyfarer or Skyfarer's Journey or something like that. And it is a very interactive website and explains a lot about this flight. And as James mentioned in his feedback to us, he goes into a lot of detail about measuring altitude and, above ground level, AGL, MSL, and that kind of stuff. And Lots of good stuff in here. Air traffic control zones, waypoints, talking about flying at night, the Northern Lights, landing, etc. So you should check out this site. Mark Banneker is a senior first officer for British Airways on the Boeing 747-400 fleet and author of, here we go, Skyfaring, A Journey with a Pilot. And this essay in this website, the link which is in the show notes for you, was adapted from the author's book. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, James. Tim, speaking of books, and Stan again mentioned the Skyfaring book by Mark Banneker. Again, hopefully I'm not butchering that name. And I ended up buying I think I did, or at least it was on my list of things to do, with one of my credits from Audible.com. Tim writes, you mentioned on your latest show about listening to audiobooks. I have a favorite reader. His name is Scott Brick. His latest audiobook is Lusitania. I would strongly urge you to listen to it if you can actually find the time to do so. Edward Herrmann, the great character actor that recently passed, is the reader of the next in line for me, Boys in the Boat, a recent bestseller about an Ivy League rowing team and their quest for gold in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. Another great voice and story. Okay, well, thank you for the nice tips, Tim, for a Audible book from Audible.com. And just in case you haven't heard me say so, for you, a listener of the Airline Pilot Guy show, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service, which I'm a member of, and I listen to their audiobooks. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/airlinepilotguy. That's audibletrial.com /airlinepilotguy for your free audiobook. And you don't think they're going to have enough books for you? They have more than 180,000 audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Okay, so check it out. All right, back to feedback. Thank you, Tim, for the Audible suggestion. Now, where was I? Wes McIntosh sends me feedback, voice feedback.
Hey, Captain Jeff. This is Wes McIntosh here. I just wanted to provide some feedback on the article that you mentioned in the last podcast dealing with the salt on the windscreen of the Aer Lingus plane. It brought to it reminded me of a NOAA flight back in 2007 that I read about that actually lost 3 engines in flight, had 3 engines fail in flight due to salt ingestion. And they were also flying in the North Atlantic, the northern latitudes up there near St. John's, Newfoundland. And they actually it was high winds, high relative humidity, cooler temperatures, and a lack of rain showers. And they lost 3 engines. They went through a rain shower as they were drifting down at 700 feet per minute, and then they were heading towards the ocean, and by the time they got to 800 feet above the water, they went through a rain shower, and they were able to relight their engines and fly back to Newfoundland. And I looked into more of this Aer Lingus case, and it looks like they had to go around the first time due to high winds or high crosswinds, and on their vectors back around, they were vectored out over the water with very similar conditions to that NOAA P3 that experienced the engine failure. So I guess the Aer Lingus pilots did save the plane by getting the salt off the windscreen, but I also think there was a little bit more to it. They actually, if they had been in those salty conditions for any number of time, they could could have experienced even worse situation with engine failures had they been in there for hours at a time. Anyway, I was familiar with the NOAA case because I'm a Coast Guard pilot. My last tour I flew C-130s up in Newfoundland on the ice patrol, and on one occasion we did start building up salt on the windscreen just as this Aer Lingus flight did, and we brought it up for discussion, the case of the NOAA P3 back in 2007, and how they lost 3 engines because of it. So anyway, just a kind of a random thought there. And I also, when we were flying C-130s in the Coast Guard, we did have a HUD, so I also wanted to provide some feedback there to the listener who was asking about the HUD, the heads-up display. Yeah, I mean, the heads-up display is a game changer for situational awareness. While it does at first glance look busy, like a lot of information there in front of your face, I became not dependent on it or not reliant on it, but it was sure nice to have. When it was gone, I really had to. My scan got slower, and the nice thing is you don't have to look down and look at your airspeed. You don't have to look down and look at your altitude. It's all right there in front of your face. And it is focused to infinity, so you don't have to focus your eyes kind of on the piece of glass and then off in the distance. You focus off in the distance at your aim point, and your HUD will look perfectly in focus to you. You can read everything on there, so it's nice. Another nice thing was we had a thing called a HUD cursor, which is a little hash mark that we could type in a latitude and longitude, or type in an airport identifier, or hit a spot on the digital map, and they would actually overlay a cursor in the HUD that if you looked at that cursor in the HUD, you could look past it and see the actual spot on the ground that you're looking for. So it'd help you find airports and targets that you're looking for. But anyway, I just thought I would provide some feedback, and hope you're doing well, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, Wes. I'm starting to get a little tired, actually, and hungry. So thank you for your feedback regarding the NOAA flight, the salt ingestion, and your feedback regarding heads-up displays. That's really interesting and useful information, and I'll include the couple of links that you included in your feedback to me in the show notes. Appreciate it, Wes. Let's see, moving on. I'm going to skip that one. Tracy White, longtime listener, first time sending feedback. Actually, I have sent feedback before, which apparently never made it into your hands due to reasons you've mentioned in recent episodes. Thanks for setting me straight. Well, it wasn't your fault, Tracy. It was the website and the way it handled the feedback. So I do apologize for that. Again, you can use the website if you want, or I would highly recommend that if you want to send me feedback, just use your email program and send it to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. That way, for sure, it'll get to me. And in that, if you have a smartphone or a tablet or whatever kind of recording device you want to include audio feedback, as Wes just did, you can attach it, put it in MP3 format, or a compressed format so it doesn't take a lot of space, and attach it to the email and send it to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. Or you can go to speakpipe.com/airlinepilotguy, and you can use your computing device's built-in microphone to record some feedback. Remember, that's only 3 minutes long, I think, that they give you to do your feedback. And if you run out, then you can call it back and leave some more. So, okay. Anyway, with regard to Miami Rick's mention of the brevity code Angels, he's correct. Here's an excerpt from APP-7D, the Joint Brevity Code Word publication. Note, use of the term code word here does not imply the use of classified terminology. Angels blank means the height of friendly aircraft in thousands of feet from mean sea level. For example, Angels 1.5 equals 1,500 feet, or Angels 0.5 equals 500 feet. Angels 0.5 is usable, but the term cherubs is typically used to refer to altitudes less than 1,000 feet MSL. By the way, of all the violators of this joint, put in capital letters, joint, in other words, all the services, brevity code word, you U.S. Air Force guys are the worst. As a Navy guy myself, I got to give you Air Force guys a jab whenever I can. Just as Angels 15 would be 15,000 MSL, Angels 35 would be 35,000 MSL, for example. I can't count the times I've heard U.S. Air Force pilots check in at Angels 230, which would be 230,000 feet MSL. Impressive if it were real, but I ain't buying it. All jokes aside, love the podcast, and I've enjoyed the addition of your co-hosts, Miami Rick and Dr. Steph. Keep up the good work. Fair seas and following winds. Tracy White. Thank you, Tracy. Do appreciate it. And yeah, you know what? Maybe it's just the type of missions that I flew, or the type of airplane that I flew in the Air Force. But I never once heard anybody refer to flight levels as, or altitude as, angels. Maybe that was something the fighter community does or something. I don't know. Let's see. Jay writes, your discussion of casualties in the sim reminded me of what we used to say during drills in the Navy, which was, quote, if you don't know how to recover from the casualty you're in, create a casualty you do know how to recover from. Thank you, Jay. Up the road from me in Johns Creek. Without a paddle, Captain Al again says, gents, it was me who submitted the information about the EASA rules appertaining to reduced cabin crew. Here's the extract from my ops manual. The normal company complement will not be reduced for a departure from a main base except at the time the flight is being crewed with the consent of the accountable manager, or at the time the flight departs with the consent of the captain. A main base for the purpose of this section is any base where the company has permanently or temporarily based cabin crew qualified on the aircraft type involved. If the normal complement is reduced, the number of cabin crew must not infringe upon the legal minimum unless operating in accordance with 4.1.3.4 below. I think I added an extra dot. Okay, in unforeseen circumstances, the required legal minimum number of cabin crew may be reduced below the legal minimum by one provided. May be reduced below the legal minimum by one, provided that the number of passengers has been reduced in accordance with the procedures specified in the operations manual, and a report is submitted to the authority after completion of the flight. This report should be submitted by the captain using a voyage report to the chief pilot, who will forward the report to the CAA FOI. And I'm assuming that's the Civil Aeronautics Authority Flight Operations Inspector? I don't know. Make up your own definition of CAA FOI. Note 1. Unforeseen circumstances would include sickness of a cabin crew member en route. This alleviation is not to be used at a main base as defined above. If any passengers are carried who are not company employees or directors, or who are not carried with the permission of the authority for inspection or testing purposes, then the flight is automatically classed as commercial air transport, and the rules above apply. Let's see. So, you get the gist. Looks like there are procedures and exceptions to the rule as far as the minimum number of cabin crew required for certain operations based in for airlines based in using the rules of the EASA, the European, the EASA, EASA. Thanks, Captain Al. Well, here's Frik again. What's up with you, Frik, and sad stories, or We talked about the dad who had to pay the $88 to sit next to his 4-year-old, and now we have this one. A Wisconsin woman traveling on a Southwest Airlines flight to Milwaukee says that flight attendants forced her to turn off her phone and wouldn't let her try to stop her husband, who was threatening suicide just as the plane was about to take off. Karen Momsen Evers was sitting on the runway in New Orleans when, mere minutes before the plane was to lift off, she received a text from her depressed husband who was threatening to kill himself. But as Momsen Evers began to call police to try to thwart her husband Andy's attempt to kill himself, she says that the flight attendants refused to allow her to continue her panic calls. The attendants cited FAA regulations that demand that all cell phones be turned off in flight. The steward slapped the phone down and said, "You need to go on airplane mode now." Even once in the air, the distraught woman tried to convince the attendants to let her try to call the police because her husband was threatening suicide. Still, the attendants refused to allow her any leeway. I begged her. I said, "I'm sure someone can make an emergency phone call." I just wanted someone to go and try to save him, she said, but nobody helped. The woman wasn't able to get in touch with the police until she finally landed in Milwaukee, and by then it was too late. Her husband had acted on his suicide threat. According to Southwest Airlines, issued a statement, "Our hearts go out to the Evers family during this difficult time." The company went on to explain that the flight attendants are supposed to alert the flight crew if there's some life or death situation that might affect the crew or passengers. But in this situation, the pilots were not notified, the airline said apologetically. The airline offered a refund for the flight, but no satisfactory explanation of why the system failed. That is sad. Thanks, Frik. Let's see. This I'm going to save for when we have Miami Rick again on the show. Looks like a 777-centric question. And another piece of feedback about the Airline Hacker Guy. I'm going to skip that. Oh, here's a good one. Marcus writes, "Hi, Jeff. I've been aware of your APG show for a while, but never really listened. I've been listening for a while to Extended, that's X, the letter X, Tended, which is a fantastic podcast, by the way, based in the UK, Peter Johnson and others, and Airplane Geeks, and in their shows, the feedback audience questions are always kind of boring. Since the feedback part takes up a lot of time in Airline Pilot Guy, I somehow decided not to listen. But I was wrong. In the 10 or so APG episodes I listened to recently, the audience questions and your replies discussions were really, really interesting. You've won a new listener." Well, thank you, Marcus. Marcus continues, "I am a glider pilot. I fly an ASG-29E and general aviation enthusiast. I am also a fellow podcaster. I run the Omega Tau Science podcast. While not an aviation podcast per se, I have published quite a few aerospace shows, each typically 2-hour-long interviews." And then he has a few links here. "Since you recently asked on your show for hints to more aviation podcasts, I thought this stuff may be interesting to you. My upcoming show, to be published on Monday or Tuesday, will feature a very nice conversation with a former RAF Phantom pilot. He talks about chasing bears in the Cold War. Anyway, thanks for APG. Keep it going. I'll make my listeners aware of your show in one of the upcoming episodes, likely in June, because the stuff till then is already completely produced." Wow. You do a lot of producing beforehand, don't you? Marcus from Stuttgart. And I wrote back to Marcus and said, "Hey, I've talked about your show on my show before, specifically the one that where he interviewed a Concorde pilot, and that was a very interesting podcast. So check out, as he says, it's not specifically aviation podcast, but he does talk a lot about aviation in his show. Again, that's the Omega Tau podcast. I'll have the links in the show notes. And he said he'll have his latest published by Monday or Tuesday. He sent this to me on the 16th, and that was 5 days ago. So it'll probably be out by the time you're listening to this. Let's see. First Officer Jeff sent me some feedback. Let's hear what he has to say.
Well, Captain Jeff, I can always tell when I get behind in the number of podcasts I have to listen to, yours being one of them, because it never fails. The first one I listen to when I'm behind is you asking me for more feedback. And you, as well as Rick, have shamed me, talking about me being in Antigua and then in Cancun, and to put down my pina colada. So, for your benefit, here goes.
There was this letter I read. If you like pina coladas and getting caught in the rain, if you're not into yoga, if you have half a brain.
Okay, now that I've put down my pina colada, I'll talk about the iPad fiasco that the press talked about, which wasn't much of a fiasco when you consider that of the 5,000 or so flights that American flies every day, about 50 were affected by the issue. It was strictly a Reagan national problem. There were two of the same page inserted to the Jepson application, which made it crash. It didn't crash the iPad, it just crashed the application. And the fix was to remove the application from your iPad, re-download the application, then reinstall all the charts, which takes about 30 minutes over a Wi-Fi connection. So that's why they had to go back to the gate and all the flights were delayed and canceled. So 1% of all the flights on one day. Since then, I've actually been to D.C., and it's not a problem anymore. But so that was the end of that. Rick talked about how his iPad or his EFB is actually part of the aircraft on his 777. At American, that's not the case. Our iPads do not talk to the airplane in any way, shape, or form. And like the Delta plan, or the Acme plan for you with your Surface Pros, we don't have a backup paper charts. We have our en route charts, but all the approaches, departures, arrivals, airport diagrams, those are all in the EFB, as well as all of our aircraft publications and company publications. So it makes it a little bit easier. We always have two. You can't leave a major base without two of them working, and you always have to have at least one no matter where you are. So that's about that. Anyway, I'm going to go back to my pina colada since I'm back in Cancun, and hope you all have a good time. Tailwinds to you.
Oh, life is so rough for Jeff. Oh, we feel so sorry for you in Cancun, drinking your pina colada. Thanks for kind of setting all that straight, Jeff. Yeah, it was just one application that crashed, and you know the rest of the story. So, thank you for setting it straight. I was just looking through some of these things while you were we were listening to your audio feedback, and one thing I wanted to mention that I try to include when people ask me questions on Twitter, I try to include them in the show if I think about including it in the list of things. And let's see, who asked? Somebody asked about podcasts, and if anybody knew of one from Canada, or Canadian Aviation Podcast. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find who it was that asked the question. Well, now I can't find it. But anyway, this person knows who he is. And so I looked and tried to recall any aviation show based in Canada, and I couldn't think of any. Oh, here it is. Andy Furlong. Yay, found it. Andy Furlong wrote, I'm trying to find a Canadian aviation podcast, but failing. Any ideas? And both Rick and I responded, no, we don't know of any. So maybe you out there listening might know of a Canadian aviation podcast, and if so, let me know, and then we'll let Andy know. Andy Furlong, thank you. And now the other tweet that I wanted to answer is from Mike Rogers. Where did you go, Mike? Got to get better about organizing. There we go. Actually, Mike is the one that sent me the link to the Hawaiian Airlines flight number 3 that had the fuel leak at LAX and had to return. He said, how accurate are your fuel gauges compared to general aviation aircraft? Could you detect a small leak? Well, it depends on what you mean by small, Mike. I mean, they're pretty accurate. Of course, our fuel gauges express the volume. Well, they don't really express the volume of fuel, but the weight of the fuel, because everything is, weight, the passenger weight, the cargo weight, etc. And that just makes it easier for doing all the weight and balance calculations, which we don't at Acme do ourselves. The load planning department does all that. But I would say that the fuel systems are, pretty accurate within, the increments on the airplane that I fly, 50-pound increments, digital gauges, and I think they're pretty accurate. So the fuel, as you watch the fuel burn or being added, it's in 50-foot increments on a digital display. I'm not sure what the exact tolerances are, etc., regarding that, but I'd say they're so 50 pounds divided by 6.7 would be what, 7 about 7 gallons, 7-gallon increments. That's pretty good. So, for whatever that's worth, Mike, thank you for your question and the link to that Hawaiian Airlines incident. You know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to call it quits on this one. Yeah, I still have a bunch of feedback, a lot of great feedback, audio feedback from Dispatcher Mike. We have Ryan talking about pilot-passenger communications. Declan is asking about a pilot career. Mark Ross included a link about an Air India pilot found drunk. Some more great links to videos, like the one sent in by Daniel Sinico, an emergency landing, and I think a Piper Malibu. I'm going to talk about all that in the next show. In the meantime, please, again, check out airlinepilotguy.com, where you'll find all the shows that I've recorded and videos. If you're one of those who listens to the audio but wants to see the video, that's where you'd find it in the show notes. And other good stuff there, including the aviation geek community, the Airline Pilot Guy community, the coffee fund, etc., etc., etc. So until, I don't know why I keep saying until next time, Captain Jeff here from Albany, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care and God bless.
Good day.